came from a background where if you didn't have it, you made it because you weren't going to spend the money to buy it. Out of high school, started raising some cattle, had cattle before. My wife, her family raised Angus cattle, my family raised Charolais cattle, so we didn't go with either of those breeds. When we got married at 19, we started raising Simmentals, so we did that. Kind of were scattered around, we're hauling bales here and there. We were not very efficient, but we needed to get more efficient. So instead of tractor, we needed a way to do it all with the pickup. I had just about purchased what's called a bolt-in bale handler for a pickup, but I couldn't really make myself do it because if I'd have done that, then I would not have been able to use that pickup for gooseneck, trailer towing and all that, and we couldn't afford really much of anything. A month or two later, I started putting some ideas together to come up with a flatbed, which I needed because my pickup box was shot, but a flatbed with a hydraulic bale handler built into it. So that's the backstory. We did it on pennies because I didn't have any new material, didn't have any tools to build, really not the right skill set. But with some used surplus steel that had come from Heston Corporation and an old gas-powered DC welder that we had built here, my dad and I had built, a cutting torch and a 1/2-inch drill and one big hammer, ended up, after several months, ending up with something that kind of works. Tried it, and at that time we had VERMEER bales that were built 6 foot wide instead of today's 5 foot wide, and they could weigh from 2,000 to 3,000 pounds, so they were monsters. And unfortunately the bales won. The rear part of the bed that the arms attached to wasn't strong enough, and it just kind of twisted up like a pretzel, and so back to the cold, drafty, unheated shed to revise that. Finally, after some prayerful consideration, decided that I needed some heavier material. Went to Horton, Kansas, found a big old chunk of 1/2-inch wall, 4-inch square tubing. By golly, I thought that might work. It looked overkill, but there really is no such thing as overkill. So put that on there, put the arms to that, got everything hooked up, and now the bed wins and the big bales just go right up on there. So it was quite a victory at that point. Had some folks around that kind of like laughed at it, but some other folks that had watched it work and said to us, that was family and friends, said, you know, you really owe it to yourselves to try to pursue this and see if it could go somewhere. In about that same time frame, we went ahead and got our patent on it. Again, no money, so that we actually sold some cattle to be able to pay for the patent. This is 1983, summer of '83. We decided that we were going to go find a manufacturer. Our first stop was Valley Falls, Kansas, and we pulled into what was the Hallmore plant there, and it was empty, and there was one guy left, and he said, yep, this is our last day, we're done, we're out of business. Now, why was that? Because it was 1983, the middle of the farm crisis of the mid-'80s. So they were out of business. We went to Donahue Manufacturing and Hillsboro Manufacturing down around Hillsboro, Kansas. They were interested in the idea, but not at a position where they wanted to take on any additional products. And Mr. Donahue, in fact, showed us his new equipment lot, and he said, look at all that. He said, I would take this idea on, except I can't sell this stuff, and the last thing I need is any more inventory around here. We leave there, we head back home, tail between my legs. I said in the pickup, Linda was with me, I said, well, I guess we're done, and I guess we'll just use it ourselves. And she said, no, I guess we'll do it ourselves. And I looked at her like she was crazy. I said, honey, we don't know anything about manufacturing, we don't have any place, we don't have any resources. And she was just very convinced that that's what we were to do, and that's what we did.
So I thought, yeah, we can do this. Just because I knew he was wise and he researches. We didn't have the internet and things back then, but I don't know. I just had faith in him that he could do it. So I said, well, yeah. And in my head, it was easy. So I just said, yeah, this is what we're gonna do.
After we had our conversation on the way home, I was probably never as scared as I then in my entire life. After lots of prayer and lots of consideration and seeking some kind of wisdom from higher, I decided with some advice from another guy I knew that I should talk to Rick McLean. Rick was the lead welder at Mack Equipment then, and he was wanting to start a repair shop, but he didn't think he had enough repair business to fully quit his Mack job. And so I got with Rick. He was a year older than us in school, and I said, "Hey Rick, would you want to build these beds for me?" And he said, "Well, how many do you think?" I said, "Well, I'm going to commit to one a month for 1984. A lot of people at that time thought that you couldn't haul hay with a pickup. They thought you had to use a tractor. And I assured them that, well, for the last 5 years, I have been. Then we decided to get a little braver and put an ad in the High Plains Journal. And so in November, I think we may have had one or two in November of '83. So one of the phone calls was from a gentleman named Otis Dewey, who lived out in far northwest Kansas and had a large cow-calf operation and stocker feeder. He ended up being the first customer after probably 8 or 10 phone calls back and forth. It took off like crazy that first year. As I mentioned, I had promised Rick 12 beds for all of '84. Well, we sold 60. It looked like things were going to go spectacular. Look at that, 60 beds in that year. Well, towards the end of '84, there were no more sales. I actually couldn't figure it out. I got more scared again than I'd ever been before. Eventually, turns out I was in depression, didn't know it at the time, and just really struggling. Got a baby on the way, got a house being built, not making any money in the cattle business, kind of needed to make a little bit in something. We came to realize that we were holding this little company in our control, and instead it needed to be held in God's control, not ours. We're just supposed to be the stewards. So that revelation came very clear in that, the spring of '85. And it didn't turn around instantly, but His perfect peace was there, and so that makes you be able to handle the craziness that's coming. Saw some pretty crazy answered prayers in that time, like specific, precise, sitting at a borrowed desk with a borrowed telephone, having a $4,000 invoice due, and starting to pray, "Lord, I need 4," and not even finishing the 4, and the phone rings. The phone was one of our dealers in Wyoming who needed one HydraBed. One HydraBed sold for $4,000, and we happened to have one in stock, and he was coming the next day or two, and he did. Invoice paid, da-da-da. So yeah, we saw amazing peace and provision in that time. And then the company just kind of slowly began to grow. Ranching industry got through the tough times of the '80s, and it got better. It wasn't wonderful, but it got better. People could cash flow decent pickup, and they could cash flow beds, and what had happened is the HydraBed was the first flatbed bale handler out there. And the concept then quickly kind of replaced other means of bale handling, and there were plenty of competitors. But so by that time, by the end of the '80s, early '90s there, it was in a place where it was normal. It was kind of like everybody needs a flatbed bale handler on their truck, right? So people would buy one, and then they'd buy another one and have a backup, or they'd sell one off to their nephew or grandson or something and add another one, and they just kind of kept going that way. And we ended up outgrowing we expanded our facilities west of town several times, and then just outgrew them and built out in the industrial park then in 1997. We had met a hydraulic salesman, his name is Russ Harrell. He was selling different components and hoses and stuff like that, and we became friends. Linda and I talked about the idea of offering Russ a job. Long story short, he ended up coming. He actually lived in our basement for several months until his family could come. Russ took over inventory control, and then eventually customer relations, and then in the mid-90s, Russ asked if we would consider selling him a percentage of the company. which we did. So he became a partner. Yeah, so it was a great relationship. My grandpa on my mom's side always said the time to sell is when somebody else wants to buy. Don't wait to sell something until you've let it languish or whatever. So, and the company was going really well, so we did decide to go ahead and sell it. Yeah, and the deal was concluded in October of 2005. We didn't want to disrupt lives or dealer network or anybody, employees, customers. We just wanted to try to keep it as much the same as possible. So HCC Incorporated, which is a 100-year-old company now, I think, or close to it, from Mendota, Illinois. They make harvesting equipment for combines, reels in particular. And they had not been in the livestock side of ag, and they wanted to diversify into that. So it was a good fit.
I think that GALEN and RUSS as well, one of his business partners early on, put on a really solid foundation that the company still kind of is based upon. So, I haven't seen a whole lot of changes I can think, other than just the people. We're just all getting older. We're really blessed to still have GALEN involved in the company. It's just good to have his innovative, out-of-the-box thinking and mindset as it comes to products and things like that. And he always really emphasized to me, as I was learning things from him, that it's all about the hire, and getting good people around you with integrity is paramount, to what your success could be. So, I think we have good ownership now as well that supports us and kind of is aligned with us on our values. So we keep doing what we feel like we're best at. We can't be everything to everybody, nor do we want to be. We can't chase every opportunity there is, but we will chase the ones that we believe in. And I think that's something that we can hang our hat on and we're proud of.